Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger slash Power Ranger recap. I don't know if I'm going to call it just Mighty Morphin Power Ranger. I have the 60 episodes to get through, but the intention is to get through all Power Ranger lore. So eventually it'll just be the Power Ranger recap. But right now we are in the first three seasons. We're being Mighty and Morphin. I have not calculated how long it's going to take, but it's at least a year because even if I'm recording once a week, that's still less weeks than there is number of episodes. Anyways, so today we are going to talk about what is either episode two, episode three, or episode four, depending upon when you view it and how you view it. And also the name of it changes, which is a lot of fun for me. I think this is really interesting because I talked about a little bit of this in I think the first video about the idea of when things go on streaming services that have been around for a while, it's really hard to tell if they're in the correct order. For Twilight Zone, it's easy to tell when it's out of order because it will have a different introduction that won't fit with the year that it was crafted. But you can still watch that out of order. This particular episode, you kind of have to watch in the order where it has to come second or third, because by the time we get to whatever the fourth episode is, they're starting to use things implemented in this episode. Let me tell you, this episode is wild. So this is called the unknown episode if you're looking on the Google. This is called Teamwork if you're looking on YouTube. This is called Cleanup Club if you're on Netflix, in my version of Netflix, or if you are in my brain, because I think of this episode as Cleanup Club. In fact, there are people that have cosplayed this episode, particularly with the Cleanup Club t-shirt. This episode started off really strongly and started at kind of at the top of the list near Day of the Dumpster in my ranking order. And then at some point it sort of fell down and then it bounced up a little bit back at the end. But I think I, I'm going to call it teamwork because that's what they do on YouTube. I still think Cleanup Club is a better name, but I'll call it teamwork. This episode and then the episode that kind of follows it, High Five, or is before it, High Five, is next to it. These are two episodes where I'm a little bit convinced, and I'm wondering if a pressing engagement, which is episode five on across all mediums, has the same problem. I wonder if these two episodes were made in case this didn't succeed, because both of these episodes have this very high pacing, very high stakes that go up way too quickly. But I think High Five is actually a better episode about teamwork, which is actually what this episode is about. Um, I think it's interesting too, because in this episode we see the thing I've been waiting for, which is for Zach to do a dance routine, and he does it. I don't know anyone from the hip hop scene, so I'm wondering if I was supposed to be really super underwhelmed with what he did. Maybe it was because he was showing dance moves to Alpha and therefore the audience. Um, but it was just, yeah, I was underwhelmed a little bit. It felt like something that I could actually do. Also, it did not explain how hip hop keto works because it doesn't look like it's an offensive or defensive type of dance martial arts. Like, I think with like capoeira, which I think is also a dance martial art, it feels like it's either offensive or defensive. But I'm kind of splitting hairs a little bit, honestly. Um, the episode, I think this is probably one of the stronger openings. There are shades both of High Five and Food Fight in this episode in the introduction, actually. I like this introduction for a variety of reasons. And then one reason I don't like it, and I'll start off with I don't like. I think the music actually gets in the way of this episode. It is very present, very strong, and it's everywhere. And there's a point in both the introduction and the end of the episode where the music plays, and it feels very circusy and very out of place. And I can't think of another Power Ranger episode where I feel like the music is out of place. I could be wrong, that could happen later, but specifically, the music really stands out in this episode. It's non-diegetic, the characters don't react to it. Some of it seems overly silly. Um, so I found that really distracting, which is weird because I don't usually find the music in Power Rangers all that distracting. Even the stuff that I don't like, I don't find that distracting. But this was super that. Um, I think the premise is really strong, and it's an interesting thing too because this is leaked over into the tabletop game world for the Power Rangers game and has kind of leaked over into the Boom comics about this idea of how the Rangers craft an interior life outside of being a Ranger, but also the demands of time of Rangerdom. Now, the comics, and sometimes in tabletop games, not always in my game, but sometimes in my game too, sort of makes it seem like it's something where you have to choose. And there are aspects to the episode, but there's also this sense of not that being a ranger has enhanced their interior lives yet, but that they have these things they do outside of being a ranger. In further series, and especially in series later on, like Wild Force, where the only thing you ever see them do is rangering, except for a very special episode, um, it, the series starts to feel limited. So here it doesn't feel limited, and I think this is why Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is so beloved, is because it doesn't feel like being a ranger limits who these people are. It obviously is a time sink in a lot of ways. It obviously is something you have to choose to participate in over and over again. Um, but except for the fact it kind of cuts the thing that they're doing short, especially in this episode, it doesn't feel like it gets in the way of them living their life. Um, I really also like the idea of the pairings off of this episode because you don't get a lot of Trini and Kim centered episodes. We have the Kim and Billy episode coming up. We're gonna get Trini versus Goldar in this episode, which is super cool because I don't think you see very much of that across the series as a whole. Um, yeah, but there's something interesting. The pairings go really well. I love this idea that Trini and Kim either have this friendship based on conservation or like they both became aware of the issue and decided to do something together about it off screen. Like nobody, I feel like in a modern episode of this, I would have to sit through a 5 minute exposition of them deciding to do something about this and then doing the thing. And here in this episode, it starts off with them just doing the thing. The reveal that Rita has taken our natural inclination to pollute and has turned it into something really fraught that she can control is actually quite devious. And I'm intrigued to know more. I also think that um, that idea is like in response to probably Captain Planet and what I would perceive in 93 is not Captain Planet's necessarily popularity, but maybe at 93 at this point, Captain Planet was in syndication, so more kids were seeing it. Syndication is that great thing in TV where it saved a whole bunch of TV shows and introduced TV shows. Like the really famous example is MASH, obviously, where MASH was not popular until the summer it went into syndication and people saw it over and over again. So Captain Planet was probably a bit like that. This feels a bit like a Captain Planet-y episode, but I do not mind that. Captain Planet did have five teens with attitude, of course, all on its own. It did have some form of Megazord, except the Megazord talked and had a mullet. Um, I think that this premise is really cool because it gives an interior life. It's a little bit like the guys all have stuff they have to do, so when they come up, I remember the guys being a little more dismissive when I originally watched this episode as a kid, but when I watch it here, they are not dismissive. They are for conservation, but they are really shy about standing up and sticking their neck out. I can't figure out why they are shy about it, but I actually kind of like the idea that Kim and Trini aren't dismissive of them and they don't guilt them, but they're like, hey, it would be really strong if we did this together. Um, in terms of time, I think if there had been more time in the episode, like if they'd stricken one of the 14,000 plots happening in this episode, um, that maybe they would have done a thing where they had gone to like someone in power and the boys had come with them. We love a good girl power episode, though. We love a good Kim and Trini team up. We love a good time where the girls are self-actualized. I don't know that I love the idea that Alpha calls them the dudettes. That feels a little bit too Alvin and the Chipmunks. But I think that just part of it is kind of about the charm and the age of the Power Ranger 90s universe in a way. Again, this is something I think the 2017 movie also kind of struggled with how to do was to show off an interior life and to give these characters different points of view. But the 2017 movie was behind the eight ball. because by the time we got the 95 movie and we had the show, like we had 3 years of interior life with these people, 3 years where we met like cousins and they had love interests for better or for worse, and they were learning to grow together. The 2017 movie really is behind the eight ball, and it tried to very much Breakfast Club things very quickly so they could become Rangers. And I think that's part of where it fell. I mean, also, it was just an incredibly aesthetically ugly movie. Anytime I watch the Power Rangers, I feel like the reason people remember this 93 to 95 section is because even if you think the putties are grotesque, they're grotesque in something of an interesting way. Goldar is a pretty interesting villain to look at. Rita is pretty iconic. Finster is. Um, the suits the Power Rangers have, the way their Zords look, even the way their power weapons look, because this is the episode where they get their power weapons, which I have thoughts on, by the way. I'm going to get to that. But I think aesthetically, this is much more interesting. And even the 95 movie was more interesting aesthetically than the 2017 was. So, yeah, I'm not sure where that was going. I sort of lost the trail a little bit there. But it was about the interior life. I think the interior life is very successful. The idea that we get the foreshadowing of Eye Guy. We know I don't think we ever see Billy leading a science club meeting, but I think we see him. I don't think he's in control of the science presentation episode for Eye Guy at that opening, but he does some really cool stuff with VR, so I'm very excited for that. This is also an interesting episode if you have it second, because if this episode then later becomes High Five, you get to see Billy do science immediately because High Five is the introduction of the risk communicators, which they have in this episode, which means High Five kind of has to come second, actually. And then this kind of has to come third because like the power weapons. So by the time you get to Food Fight, they have both those things. There's a whole mishmash of like, if you're looking for continuity, obviously this is not necessarily the thing you want to watch, but just thinking about the sequence of, and they get these one episode after the other. I'm gonna go a little diatribe here. In the Sentai, the power weapons are a full episode unto themselves that is not about teamwork. Because in the Sentai, they're not teams with attitude. They are, but they've been in eternal slumber for a long time. So um, they have to go on this journey. I think the reason they have so many villains here is that they sort of bring the Minotaur to life because I think he's one of the guardians of the power weapons they have to prove. If that plot sounds familiar, it's because it's partially the plot to the 1995 movie. It's partially what they have to do when they go into the Bone Graveyard on Dulcea's planet, I guess. Um, yeah, but there's so much that goes on in this episode. I'm actually struggling a little bit because it's the idea, like the setup is so good, and there's like 3 episodes in this one episode, so I kind of wish they just done the setup. Um, this is the introduction again to Principal Kaplan. This almost feels like the same introduction as Food Fight, where they're going to get blamed for something that they didn't do. Um, but he's much kinder here. Principal Kaplan is actually interested in what his students do. He does give very building vibes, which is from Saved by the Bell, which I think is intentional. I liked the opening of the episode so much, and then it sort of slowly went downhill. There's a lot of stuff that Zordon does, which is very like Deus Machina sort of stuff. Like the whole thing about the power weapons is they do some of the battle, and then they cut to the command center where Zordon's like, maybe it's time to talk to them about the power weapons. Back to the battle. The battle escalates. They get into their Zords to battle the Minotaur. They look like they're winning against the Minotaur. We actually get to see them use, everybody uses like the special things that their Zords can do that we don't get to see very often as a singular unit, and then they combine them but don't form the Megazords. They're using laser eyes. And then Zordon pulls them away when they're sort of winning. One of the things the Minotaur is capable of is using a shield, which is why I think that is a lot of the Sentai material, because I vaguely recall that from their kind of power weapon escalade, because it was a whole escapade episode, getting the power weapons, which I really like, and I tend to use in my tabletop gaming. Because I like the idea of you have to go through the trial to get the thing, so I don't just give level ups a lot of the time. I try to pace that out. Um, yeah, there's so much going on because then Zordon pulls them back while they look like they're winning to then give them their power weapons, which then they introduce and use. It's sort of unwieldy because, especially from a merchandising standpoint, it's too much for a viewer to anticipate and want and desire at one time. Um, like my tiny brain would have been and probably did war about wanting the swords versus wanting the power weapons when they were introduced. I actually like the power weapons more. I also like that there is a feat in the tabletop game for people that don't necessarily want to get in a Zord or for if Zords aren't introduced right away, called Giant Killer. And I actually like this kind of giant killer skill feat perk bonus thing, whatever you want to call it. Because in some of these episodes, and in this episode, you actually see Rangers not necessarily call in their Zords immediately, but still go after the bad guys. Bad guys here is plural because the putties go after Kimberly and Trini once they're at the abandoned dump waste site, which we'll never see again. But it just kind of exists somewhere in Angel Grove. It doesn't exist in Angel Grove in the tabletop game, only in this version of it. But there's like a water table thing going on there. There's definitely it's the very special conservation pollution version of the episode, which I like. Again, and this idea is that there's no one there, it's abandoned because it's not a trap for the Rangers, but Rita both knows who the Rangers are and Rita knows what pollution is. And so she's like, I'm going to use it to my advantage. And I think it's really cool. I think Rita gives up way too easily here. But so Trini and Kim get attacked. Um, they don't actually they get attacked, but they're actually really good at being defensive. It does not occur to them to morph at all, but they are really good at being defensive. They don't actually need to morph as much. Kimberly is already starting to show a lot more prowess, both as a gymnast using gymnast karate, if you will, gymnast Keto. And Trini, of course, already came in with the skill set of karate. And so it's interesting because they could have transformed, but they actually don't seem like they need to as much, which is super cool. I do kind of question why they didn't, because obviously when you're not morphed, a putty is more dangerous than if you are morphed, and you can clearly see that. Zach gets to witness this while he's doing a dance class at the command center. He just kind of stands there instead of like hopping to it like Zordon has to tell him. Zordon actually calls the guys and then tells them to go, but then the Minotaur hits, so they have to go after the Minotaur while leaving the girls in peril, and Zordon is going to watch to make sure the girls are okay, or the dudettes, as Alpha calls them. Um, and so then the guys go to face the Minotaur, who is on the other side of a cliffside from where the girls are, which means they could have teleported and helped the girls, and then all five gone to face the Minotaur together, but they chose not to because the Minotaur is not actually in any part of the city where anyone is in danger. He's just kind of there. So a little bit of like this is where you can super tell they're using footage from something else because the Minotaur is not actually like a problem necessarily right away. Um, it's also interesting too. This is one of the few times where the five don't morph together purposely. And so what happens is when they morph, the girls know the boys aren't coming. But again, they have the risk communicators so they can actually talk to Zordon. So they morph, and the girls morph after the boys, but the girls morph in the same order. The boys morph in a different order. When the boys morph alone, it goes Billy, Zach, and then Jason. I don't know why I find that interesting, but the fact that the order changes for the boys slightly and Billy goes first. I'm trying to figure out if that's like a defensive, we need him to do this because he's less likely to be capable without his suit sort of thing. I don't know what it's about, but it's interesting they don't go in the order the boys don't. The boys do okay against the Minotaur, but again, the Minotaur is much more ferocious before it is made bigger, um, because it uses its shield as a shield. And then, if that wasn't enough, we get that where the Minotaur uses the shield, the guys are hurt, the girls transform and they start kind of kicking butt They call putties Clayface, which I really like, or Clay Dude, which I really like. I like the derogatory nickname. Oh yeah, I forgot in the intro, Bulk and Skull are also there making fun of, for some reason, conservation. They have one of their hangers on with them, the girl that looks like she's from the Four Non-Blondes video. Um, and again, it's weird because it is sort of a reminder of how much teenagers they still are as teenagers, even though they are now superheroes. But it sort of takes on a tone. It's weird that like Bulk and Skull are kind of hostile toward touching each other, but yet they both sort of go after Kimberly. Like there's something very strange about the writing for Bulk and Skull in these early episodes. Like they're trying to write bullies, but they're trying to write like bullies that can't do actual harm. But I mean, I lived in the early 90s, so I know how bad bullying got. So it's sort of like they were trying to write bullies for TV, but there were just these glimpses of them where they could be like unsavory, I will say. If you watch this episode, Unknown, Cleanup Club, Teamwork, whatever you want to call it, that the interaction with Bulk and Skull and Kimberly is unsettling in a way that I don't have the word for because I don't think violent is the right word, but it definitely there's an undercurrent there of something that I feel a little icky about. And I could be reading into it because again, this is adults writing bullies in high school for something kids will watch. So maybe it's just the idea that they are something of a threat, but it never feels like they are a threat to the five. It feels like they're just annoyances. Here it took on a tinge, but still, it's a pretty good introduction. So we get the introduction, we get the putties attacking Kimberly and Trini. The boys have to deal with the Minotaur, who is not near any people at all. There's blowback from the Minotaur using a shield. And then for some reason, Babu and Squat are throwing boulders down a cliff, which has created a big hazard for the boys, Rangers. And this is where we cut to Zordon, and Zordon's like, I need to reveal the ancient secret of the power weapons, but then proceeds to watch them fight for another 5 minutes before he does that. Like, what's weird is that he didn't call them back right away when they were in danger. They called their Zords, which is the appropriate thing to do because they don't have power weapons. And the Zord gives them an upper hand because at this point, Goldar, for some reason, has joined the battle. So like there's the henchman villain, the villain of the week, and then Goldar, and all three are happening at the same time. And Goldar chooses to attack Kimberly and Trini, and they have the footage of Kimberly getting hit, even though Trini sent Kimberly away to go get the guys. And it's just this thing of like, I did not feel they were in more danger with Goldar than I felt they were in with Bulk and Skull at one point of the intro. And I think that rubbed me the wrong way too. Because I always feel like Bulk and Skull, while antagonistic, should never make me feel that way. Um, I don't know. And Goldar is like a wolf baboon guy from another planet, so I feel like the guy with the sword and the golden armor should always be more of the implicit villainy. Um, yeah, so there's three separate villains here, four if you count Babu and Squat. And it's only after they have gone to their Zords and started doing Zord stuff, which I thought the Zord sequence was really cool. The Zord sequence, where they're showing them not as not the not Megazord, the pre-Megazord form. Before they'd even do that, they actually like this is a really cool Trini versus Goldar episode, and we don't see that a lot. Um, Teamwork only ended up above Food Fight in my ranking list because of what the Zords do and how they handle both the Minotaur and Goldar. Obviously, the putties. I don't think the putties ever get bigger as henchmen, and I don't think it's ever explained why. I'm curious to see if it's ever explained why. But then Zordon stops the battle, calls them back. Goldar goes away. They get their power weapons, which are super neat. I love the power weapons. I love the ritual of it. They go back without their Zords and they battle a Minotaur that is scaled down for some reason. I guess Rita respects the same conventions. I mean, Rita doesn't attack the kids in high school, so I guess she respects some conventions. It feels like with Rita here in the beginning, especially. that because she knows who they are, that it's not a personal relationship per se, but it's more about the fact that Rita views this as more of a game and a power struggle than actually just being super vicious. It's the difference between her and Diva Talks, her and Zed, her and Ivan Ooze, is sort of this weird antagonist, but knowing you're the antagonist relationship. Like there's not this thing where I only ever feel like she's toying with them, but there's this thing where like she can't believe she can win, but it's sort of like she understands there's this balance of power. Maybe it's because she's still afraid that Zordon could put her in another version of the dumpster, which I think we have an episode coming up where they explain all that. But what's interesting is that this relationship Rita has with the Rangers is so different from the any other relationship a Ranger team has with its foes up until I'm going to say a Rancic, maybe. I would argue Rancic, maybe Merrick, maybe when you get to an anti-hero, maybe like Heckle per se. Um, Jared potentially. So this is actually an interesting tradition where, again, we know that eventually Rita is going to turn into the All Mother, and that'll be in like 6 or 7 years from this episode at this point, and nothing we ever saw coming. And of course, when I was a kid, I had kind of finished watching Power Rangers at that point for a while. Um, that's interesting. The relationship Rita has with Zordon and the Rangers is like she wants to destroy them, but it's also sort of a game for her. It's sort of about feels like it could be about exploring her power or getting her minions to do things. Like it feels like the Earth is in danger, but she's just descaled in power enough that I feel like the comics makes her more villainous and more present in a way. I don't think it's bad. It's not a critique. It's just kind of an observation of there's like a sort of a Kim Possible dynamic going on, or maybe a Doofenschmirtz dynamic. I feel like the Rita Ranger dynamic gets used a lot after Power Rangers because it actually is a really great way to have tension and stakes, but without having the tension and stakes, that would be too much for people in the age group the show's intended for. Yeah, so the Rangers get power weapons, and everybody loves the power weapons. And then they have the end of the episode where they come back to the beginning. This is where it's like food fight where Kaplan gets mad at them and then they have to clean up and they clean up before Kaplan gets back. The music is really jarring. Um, yeah, so I was actually surprised because I thought teamwork was going to be kind of underneath Day of the Dumpster. Like I was kind of surprised where I really liked the beginning and then it slowly devolved for me because there was just too much against the Rangers. They never had a chance to actually act as much as I like. And when they acted, like when um the Saber-Tooth Tiger Zord like actually like bit at the villain, like I cheered for that. Like getting to see Billy use his Zord stuff, getting to see the first iteration of Jason's T-Rex Zord tail whip, getting to see a little bit more about what this like. It feels like there are like 2 or 3 episodes in this that on their own would have been perfectly fine episodes, but it feels like if this was the third episode, because it would have to be the third, and High Five would really have to be the second at that point. If this was the third episode, um, it really does feel like they weren't sure if this was going to succeed, so they kind of slammed 3 things into one. But like if it had been me in charge, I would have wanted the pollution episode to be one episode, maybe not the second episode, but the setup works really well to do interior life work. And then you do the either the power weapons or the Zord work. I think would be better to have the Zord and then the introduction of the power weapons, which is probably why this is episode 4, at least in the Google ranking results. Um, because you've already introduced the Zords in episode 1, and they say it's like second nature. So in episode 2, then you'd want them exploring the Zords more. And then episode 3, could be the power weapon. And then episode 4, High Five, which is more, I feel like without, because they use the phrase teamwork a couple times here to really hit you over the head with it. But I actually think High Five is a better episode for talking about teamwork because I think it's more personal. Um, so for the ranking right now, because I'm gonna release like a really short shorts about my ranking for my top 5 after I do the next episode, pressing engagement. So right now the order is episode one, Day of the Dumpster, episode three, High Five, episode four, Teamwork, and episode two, Food Fight. I do think after we get past the first five episodes, it will start being more consistent, but it's really weird that these first five episodes, the order of them is not. I mean, in the Google results, if you Google it, one of the Green with Evil episodes is episode zero, which is strange. So it must have been a pilot, a backdoor pilot for Tommy's entrance or something. I don't know. But or I guess it would have been a backdoor pilot, like if it premiered on TV and then later you saw Day of the Dumpster and you'd wonder what happened and come back. I don't know why it's like that in the Google rankings, but it is. Um, so I'm excited to see after pressing engagement, which is it looks like we're going to go from this set of like teamwork, getting to know each other episodes into a section of episodes where each character gets a little bit of a focus. Because we have the next episode is about Jason bench pressing, and then I think he is going to be fighting alone in the Shadow Zone. And then after that, I see that I've got a Trini themed episode, which is the one with the clown, which became a kind of I think the clown is a staple introduction into the universe in the TTRPG book. And this is the one that can turn people into cardboard with magic sand. Um, I really thought the rad bug was earlier too, so I'm thinking probably we'll get the rad bug, which is one of my favorite holdovers from the Sentai that they try to explain is that Billy has just the ability to make a time traveling Volkswagen bug car, which I am so amused by, and I want to watch all of that. Um, yeah, but so this is the first four episodes. So Teamwork lands currently in the third spot, but I don't know how long it's going to be in the top five, let alone the top 10. Just some of the villain, like the skull villain is more compelling than the Minotaur. The Minotaur doesn't speak at all. But the Minotaur is not a villain like in a tabletop game sense, a villain that has a shield that can reflect a ranged attack has a lot of possibility that they don't really give him here. He only really gets one attack off and then boulders rain down from the sky thanks to Babu and Squat. So there's something kind of uneven about the urgency. I think if they'd had faith in the product, because I'm guessing they probably did the first four or five episodes back to back, so maybe it was still proof of concept. But I think if this had been later in the series, you could have done the pollution episode and the power weapon episode and the Zord weapon episode separately and had three I think this is three very successful episodes in one. Whereas High Five feels like two episodes in one, this feels like three episodes in one, and it's not strong for it. Um, yeah, but so this is Cleanup Club or Episode Unknown or Teamwork, depending upon who you ask and where you watch it at. Let me know in the comments what this episode title was for you, because I do recall when I was little that I think my version of it was called Cleanup Club. And of course, those shirts are very iconic. Yeah, so that was for this week. Next week, or next time, be pressing engagement, which is going to be a Jason focused episode. And until then, may the power protect you.